Is there coffee over there?
Yeah.
Would you put a little bit in my cup, please?
Yeah.
Sorry. Please, sir. I'm back on coffee, but not past 11. Can't sleep. Thank you.
You have 30 minutes until 11.
Thank you, Jane. You and Daron are matching. Look at Daron's chic shirt with the holes in it.
Thank you. This was earned.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you try to climb over a fence?
It's just an old shirt.
I just saw an interview with Ralph Lauren and he's wearing an old shirt and the interviewer's like, is that a shirt that you designed? He's like, no, this is from Kmart. I've had it for 30 years and I love it. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Home Movies. Today, we're making biscuits. We're making biscuits and jam. We're making biscuits with jam. We're making the biscuits and then we're gonna make jam. For a really long time, I have wanted to do a jam video or like a how-to sort of situation because it's something that I make all the time, especially in the summer. And what better thing to eat jam with than a biscuit? They are a huge part of the Alison ramen you see before you. Not only one of the first jobs I ever had in cooking was making biscuits, it was also the first thing that kind of got me my job in editorial when I started working in magazines. It's like, biscuit is pretty important to me. When I first moved to New York, I was working at Milk Bar in the East Village in Manhattan, the Big Apple, little girly in the big city, didn't know anyone or anything. And I needed 2 jobs to pay rent. My first job at Milk Bar was in the daytime, and then I would do on my off days a shift at Pies and Thighs, where I made donuts and biscuits and pies. And that was sort of like the first intensive job I had had that was like, you're gonna make biscuits and pie dough for 8 hours a day. So I'm gonna measure the flour while I do this story. And I'm gonna do 3 cups of flour. That's approximately 450 grams, which I like to play that game of like, is my cup of flour 150 grams on average? And the answer is pretty much always yes. I just measured one and I was like, that's a little light. 140, I was right, it was light. My jobs before those 2 jobs were in like fine dining. I was doing a lot of, how do I say this? Really fussy food. It was like produce focused, it was like fine dining focused. It was exquisite and it was refined, but it wasn't like that helpful for a home cook or a home baker. And once I started working in a place like Pies and Thighs, I was like kind of like learning for the first time, like some basics that I had never really learned despite having worked in professional pastry kitchens for 6 years. Like I had not learned the secrets to like a perfect biscuit or a perfect pie crust really until then. So I credit them with a lot of the information that I have and like the experience to kind of figure out like what's too wet for pie dough, like the right amount of times to fold for a biscuit. Having that time in my life where I could just like zone out and like really focus on doing one thing really, really well, I learned a lot. 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. And so if you've never made pie crust or if you've never made a biscuit and you do it for the first time and it doesn't come out perfectly, that's totally fine and honestly to be expected. And the same thing definitely happened to me multiple times. It is a practice. You don't know what you don't know. While this biscuit does have buttermilk and baking soda as a leavening, baking powder is also sort of unparalleled in its ability to lift a biscuit. So I like to include both. They do work together. You don't need that much baking soda for it to have like a deep impact, as it were. Deep impact, okay. I'm including a little bit of sugar. Just like in a cake batter, you have salt to like augment the seasoning and make sure that everything's singing, everything's tasting good. Sugar does that as well. So sugar is also a seasoning agent. It's not necessarily to make things sweet. If you're like, you know what, I really prefer a sweeter biscuit, you can do like 2 teaspoons or a full tablespoon. It just, to me, will take it more into like scone territory, which a biscuit is decidedly unsweet, a scone is decidedly sweet, unless it's a savory scone, and then all bets are off. So this is your dry mixture. From here, we add our butter. And this is, until we add the buttermilk, very similar to pie dough. We're cutting it with our fingers. We're not using a food processor. We're not using a dough cutter. There's no special tool you need. These are the only tools that you need. You use your hands, you make your biscuits, everybody wins. All right, so I'm gonna measure 8 ounces of cold, unsalted butter. You're going to cut your butter into small-ish pieces. So your butter is ideally being coated by all this flour. And you have like little individual blocks here. So you take the butter and you kind of flatten it with your palms, but really you're just trying to like disperse it evenly, and you want to work quickly because your hands are warm because our body basal temperature is 98 degrees. And I'm taking my index finger and my thumb and I'm like smushing the butter like this. Always make sure that you go to the bottom of your bowl to like bring all that loose flour to the top and incorporate it. And as long as there aren't any like very, very large chunks, you're good. This is why I don't believe in the food processor, because the food processor will make pebble-shaped, tiny pea-sized shapes of butter. Doing it with your hands will give you flat, thin, flaky pieces. And if you want a flaky biscuit with thin, flat layers of butter between flour to create those layers, then you're gonna wanna do it like this, I think. All right, I'm gonna use 1 1/4 cup of buttermilk. Buttermilk is my chosen liquid for biscuits, always and forever, every time, 100%, never go back. It is the best. All buttermilk is low fat. Don't stress out trying to find full fat buttermilk for any purpose. This is thick, luscious, delicious, creamy. It's still low fat, technically speaking. Heavy cream, I think, has too much fat. Combined with the butter, the heavy cream is gonna give you like a heavier, denser biscuit. Fat prevents light, flaky fluffiness. Fat is like rich, thick, heavier, you know what I mean? Buttermilk keeps things light, keeps it fresh, keeps it sassy. It also interacts with the baking soda because it is acidic, helping activate it, making your biscuit even lighter and even fluffier. So if that didn't convince you, I don't know what could. So I'm going to make like a little well in the center of this. This is where things get interesting. So I added about half the buttermilk and I'm just kind of lightly tossing with my hands. I'm not kneading and I'm not pressing. I'm just trying to make sure that all of the liquid is sort of like having a chance to evenly distribute. I'm gonna add the rest of it now. I don't like it when my hands touch the buttermilk immediately. It makes them too gloopy. So this is why I like to do it this way. And then I kind of just lift the bottom, which is where all the flour is, and I try to get it to the top where the buttermilk is to encourage them to mix and mingle without overmixing. And then once it's kind of like coming together and you can see it's like a big shaggy mess, I am gonna turn it out onto a work surface. This is my handy bench scraper. I use it for everything. And as you feel the dough right now, there are pockets of like very, very wet and pockets of very, very dry. Our goal here is to make sure that you could pick up the dough without it crumbling, like there's no extra flour, while also being still kind of like barely held together. But instead of like a traditional lamination, which like frankly I don't have the time or patience for, it is sort of an act of just picking up this biscuit and putting it on top, pressing it down, making it one. And if you don't have a bench scraper like this, that's fine. You don't need one. It will make your life easier. They're like $8. I think it's a very worthy investment. But you can also do it with your hands. And even though I've kneaded this a few times, it's still like kind of a shaggy mess because I'm not like working it. I'm just kind of folding it onto each other until I don't see any flour. There is a way that you could under knead this. And what happens then, you'll notice that your biscuit will sort of like almost look like it's being fried in butter. Like there will be a lot of butter on the outside and it will sort of feel less light and fluffy. Not to scare you that you could possibly under and or over knead, but you can see how flaky it looks right now. And like that's really indicative of how flaky it's going to look in your final biscuit. This looks beautiful to me. I'm gonna get the plastic wrap out and we're gonna chill these biscuits. I find that it makes for a really beautiful, clean, even-sided biscuit, which is just like, honestly, a trick. You can do the same thing with scones. You wanna get about 8 biscuits from this. Imagine a rectangle, visualize rectangle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so we have rectangle. And visualize how many pieces you're gonna get and how you're gonna go about cutting that. So evenly down the middle, 2 more, 2 more. Beautiful, gorgeous squares. If you are a stickler for measurements and numbers, oh, Jerome, actually, we grab that tape measure.
Yeah. Tape measure.
Under, maybe.
There it is.
There she is. This is a giant tape measure.
Yeah.
It's like I'm building something. We are at 9 inches by 5 inches. That will give you 8 beautiful, gorgy biscuits. So I'm gonna wrap this in plastic wrap and I'm going to let it sit in the fridge for a bit. It is going to let me cut the biscuits into beautiful, perfect, even little shapes. This is for my do-aheads. Heads. Gorgeous. I just love to pat the dough. I just do. I'm gonna stick this in the fridge. She's going in. Okay. This is old mustard, don't look at me.
Still warm.
I'm gonna be real with you. It is April. It's spring, not even really here. It's like still the end of winter. So I'm cooking with out of season fruit, and that's just the way it is. Jam time. The good news about jam is that you're adding sugar, you're adding lemon juice, you're cooking it down, you're sort of concentrating the essence of whatever fruit it is that you're using, and it's still gonna be delicious. So frankly, I'm not like a stickler for being like, you can't make jam without a season. You can use whatever fruit you want, honestly. Fresh, frozen, in season, out of season. A raspberry, even out of season. Pretty good. It's a good fruit. Okay. When you're making jam, you want to start with a wide pot. More steam can escape, more evaporation can occur, the jam happens faster. That's the name of the game. This is roughly 2 pounds of raspberries. Forgive me for using the clamshell. It is all we have right now. Raspberry jam is my favorite jam, hands down. They are acidic already. They have very, very distinct flavor. They are loaded with pectin, meaning you have so much more opportunity for like a thick jam without feeling like you have to add anything to thicken it. So we have 2 pounds of beautiful, gorgeous, out of season raspberries, and we're gonna add 1.5 cups of sugar to those raspberries. And then we're gonna cook it down. I am eyeballing this because 1.5 cups of sugar, a few teaspoons here or there is not gonna make a huge difference. This has lower sugar than the average jam recipe and certainly lower sugar than a jam you're gonna find in the store. It does not mean that you can't can it to make it shelf stable. You absolutely can. You can it. We're not gonna can today because that's, again, like a whole other video. I'm just gonna put this on medium heat. You don't wanna start your jam off too high because the sugar could actually start to caramelize because there's no real liquid in the pot. Pretty wild, actually, how, like, if you look at what's inside here and how dry it is, how much it looks like we added like a gallon of water to this pot in about 10 minutes. It's just gonna be like, everything bursts, all the juices flow forth. It's wild. Science is crazy. Fruit is amazing. We're so lucky to live here on this beautiful earth. Okay, meanwhile, I think it's time to bake our biscuits. So I'm gonna preheat the oven to 425. Biscuit dough. Do you like how I put my dish soap in the bougie bottle, but it's done?
It's done.
Where's my little brush? Don't worry, I found it. Okay, pastry brush is a tool that you should have. I hate to say it. You know me, I don't like single-use tools. I am kind of old school. I'm kind of a legacy tool girly. A pastry brush could be a paintbrush that you get at the hardware store. It could be a pastry brush that you order on the internet. But it comes in handy for anything involving like brushing an egg wash. In this case, we're gonna use buttermilk. Breaking news, my jam is already bubbling. So I'm just stirring it to make sure that the sugar starts to dissolve. This is sort of like the first part that you need to be attentive to your jam. The second part being the very, very end, when the liquid starts reducing so much that it could start scorching on the bottom of the pot. Okay, so I'm just gonna let that go. I'm not gonna think about it, touch it, talk about it, even fuss with it for like another 10-ish minutes. Okay, so these are going in. If you want extra credit, if you wanna be like, I make the flakiest, tallest biscuits, you can go the extra mile of trimming all the edges. You can already see how layered and flaky they're dying to be. Okay, again, that's extra credit, but you'll see why when we bake them. So I'm gonna cut it once down the middle, once in half perfectly, and then each half in half. And then each biscuit goes on the little tray. Doot, doot, doot. Pro tip, if you have any biscuits that are, or scones or anything, cookies, anything that you're baking on a tray, if you have any that are bigger than others, they should always go on the outside. And anything that's smaller should always go on the inside because anything on the outside is gonna bake faster. Jesus Christ. Okay, I've come back to medium heat because this is cooking and it's spitting. That's why I use a tall pot. I know it doesn't look like much fruit, but imagine if this were full, you would have fruit bubbling everywhere. It would be a disaster. So I'm at like a medium-high heat right now, and I'm stirring occasionally. I'm gonna let that go for like, probably like another 5 to 10 minutes. All right, biscuits. We're gonna brush them with buttermilk. It's like painting that doesn't matter. There's big strokes, messy everywhere, who cares? It's my favorite style of baking and or painting, which is who cares, chaos, mess, lack of precision, another phrase that comes to mind. I am finishing these with a little flaky salt. I'm gonna be eating them with butter and jam as a sweet, delicious treat. They still need flaky salt on top. Sorry, they just do. All right, these are gonna go into a 425 degree oven. Because I'm baking with convection, I'm gonna bake them for like 15 to 20 minutes. If you're working on a standard no fan, no convection oven, you're gonna be 20 to 25 minutes, but you're looking for the same thing. Puffed, golden brown, nice tops, crunchy, delicious, fluffy, buttery, etc. Okay. All right, our biscuits are in the oven. Our jam is almost ready. I can smell it, which means we need to cut our lemons in half because every jam needs a little help in the acid department, no matter how acidic you are. I happen to have some nice Meyer lemons, and I think Meyer lemon and raspberries, a gorgeous combo. Raspberry is also a really nice fruit to make other jam with. It's high in pectin, it's high in acid. So anytime you have other fruit like peaches, even strawberries, definitely rhubarb, it is the perfect candidate to like basically 50-50 it. Raspberries with their flavor and their acidity and their texture and their color will really sort of make up for anything that another fruit lacks. The bubbles go from tiny, fast, furious, bubbling water, to thick, slow, molassesy. And that's because the water has left the pot, and what we're left with is the fruit, the pectin, the flavor, the sugar. So I'm gonna squeeze in 1 lemon, which is about 2 tablespoons worth of juice. It is thick and beautiful, and if you move your spoon through the bottom of the pot, like a pretty clean line like that, that's a really good indication that when it's chilled, it's gonna be very, very well set. There's like a bit of a skin, which sounds gross, but you know what I mean? It's like a thin layer. That's the pectin activating and creating what is going to be like the set texture of the jam. So I'm gonna put this in little jars and move on with our life. So these are 6-ounce jars. I think it's a cute little size, good for gifting. I'm not selling this jam or anything, so I'm not sterilizing my jars. I'm not doing any of the health protocol. This is for me, myself, and I. And these jars are clean, and that's great. The other thing's helpful in jam making, a ladle. If I had a smaller one, I'd use it, but I only have this 8-ounce one, which is helpful most of the time, but right now, kind of too big. So tiny plastic flexible containers that oh fuck. Well, I just broke that. I'm very strong. When you're making jam, you do want to do this pretty quickly because it will actually start to gel in the pot, especially with something like raspberry, which it happens really quickly. You can already tell this is like setting. You want to never come like exactly to the top, especially if you're canning, but you do want to be sort of like at that line. The nice thing about raspberry jam, make like a tiny batch of this stuff, and like depending on how much jam you're consuming, could last you, yourself, in your home for quite a while, or like a really super cute little house gift that took you what, like maybe a half an hour. Pretty cool. Ta-da! They're gorgeous, they're floofy. I like my baked goods to be brown, 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 like almost too dark by some people's standards. To me, brown equals flavor. It is sugars caramelizing, it is flour toasting, it is flavor, it's crunchy, it's texture. If you prefer your baked goods a little less brown, do a side-by-side taste and you tell me what you think. I dare you. Cool, so we're gonna do some jam and biscuit eating. Meanwhile, I'm gonna fry some eggs and fry some bacon, and we're gonna have a little breakfast. Yum delish. Crispy eggs. I will say that I like to fry my eggs like this. The idea is that the edges are crispy and that the yolk is barely set.
Look at that.
Oh yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. I love gingham, I'm not afraid. Who knows it? But this is sweet little breakfast or lunch or whatever. The nice thing about a biscuit is that it can be served for anything or with anything. Let's eat this. What a beautiful day. Breakfast for one. This is obviously not all for me. This, you know, we're performing. This is a narrative. We're showing you what life could look like. This is a gorgeous biscuit though. Very important to pull apart, never slice. The chips fall where they may. That does look good, I will say. But imagine you have like a little party and you're like, come over for brunch or whatever, and you serve little biscuits with jam and butter, and they find out you made the biscuits and the jam. It's gonna be so cute. This breakfast rules, and we're having it for lunch, but you could also have it for dinner. And now there's a bee on me. So 1 out of 1 bees agree that this jam is awesome. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Oh, really good biscuit.